All right, so Doubao and Claude Opus 5 are two of the most talked about AI models right now, and the price gap between them is genuinely wild. Dubao's API input runs about 11 cents per million tokens. Opus 5 runs $5, and that's roughly 45 times more expensive. So I ran both models across 4 real tests: multilingual performance, pricing, long context reasoning, and content policy. And every score traces back to a verified source. No vendor money involved, no cherry-picked prompts, just the actual published data. What I didn't expect: the winner isn't obvious. And it really comes down to one thing about your workflow that most people don't think about until they're already locked in and paying for it. This comparison matters if you're deciding where to route your AI budget or working across languages and need to know which model actually holds up. Because pick the wrong one and you're either burning money on a flagship model for tasks that don't need it, or you're hitting content walls mid-workflow on a budget tool that can't go where you need it to. Test 1 is multilingual and Chinese language performance. And the problem here is super concrete. You deploy a model for a Chinese-speaking audience. Halfway through a conversation, it starts feeling like a different product. The depth drops, the dialect coverage disappears, and your users notice immediately. That's a real cost. Doubao covers 20 plus regional Chinese dialects, and it's the #1 consumer AI in China by monthly active users as of April 2026, while Claude Opus 5 isn't even available in mainland China now. Bear in mind, neither side published head-to-head multilingual benchmark scores, so I'm working from capability data and market position, not a direct number comparison. Okay, so before I call this one, the nuance matters. Claude Opus 5 does have free BenchLM multilingual benchmark entries. Dubao's international platform covers 18 languages with a dedicated translation model for 28 plus, but users consistently report Dubao's English depth drops noticeably outside Chinese. So this really depends on which language direction you're working in. Doubao takes test 1. Honestly, I was expecting this to be closer, given Claude's multilingual entries on BenchLM, but the combination of 20 plus dialects, native Mandarin optimization, and flat-out market dominance in China makes it a clear win. So the score sits at Doubao 1, Claude Opus 5.0. Test 2 is subscription cost and free tier access. And the scenario I keep seeing is you run a high volume workflow through Opus 5 for a month, and the API bill is 5 to 10 times what you budgeted. Or you're a solo user who just wants to try something without a credit card and Opus 5 turns you away at the door. Both of those hurt. Doubao 1.5 Pro, API input comes in at about 11 cents per million tokens. Claude Opus 5 is $5 per million on input and $25 on output, and Dubao's output price is around $0.275 per million tokens. So that output gap is roughly 90 times, and Doubao keeps a free tier while Opus 5 requires a paid plan, full stop. Take the DAO subscription numbers with a grain of salt though. The paid tiers, 68 yuan, 200 yuan, 500 yuan per month, we're still in testing as of May 2026. So those figures are provisional and we don't have full details on Claude Max pricing. But the API numbers are published and verified, and that's where the real gap lives for developers. Doubao wins test 2, and it's not close. I was expecting a meaningful gap, but 45 times cheaper on API input plus a free tier versus no free tier at all is way more lopsided than I thought going in. So Doubao is now 2 for 2, and Claude Opus 5 is still at 0. Test 3 is long context document reasoning. And the situation I'm thinking about is you feed a model a 300-page legal document or a full code base, and it starts dropping context halfway through, giving you answers that contradict earlier sections or just refusing to process the whole thing. That's not a minor annoyance. That's a broken workflow. What surprised me here is how one-sided the published data is. Claude Opus 5 has a 1 million token context window plus top scores on Frontier Bench, Arc AGI 3, and Cursor Bench, while Dubao's best published context is 256,000 tokens, and I couldn't find any equivalent reasoning benchmark scores for it anywhere in the evidence. That's real data absence, not a tie. The honest caveat is that Anthropic's Arc AGI 3 claim, 3 times the next best model, comes directly from Anthropic with no independent replication found in the evidence. So take that specific number with some skepticism. But the context window gap, 1 million versus 256,000, is just a fact, and the benchmark coverage gap is real regardless of vendor spin. Claude Opus 5 takes test 3. I was expecting Doubao to at least have some published scores to compare, but there's nothing there. So Opus 5 wins on context window size, and it's the only one with published reasoning benchmarks in this category, putting us at Doubao 2, Claude Opus 5.1. Test 4 is content policy and refusal rate. And what I want you to picture is mid-project, you're writing about Taiwan-Hong Kong protests or a cybersecurity topic and the model just stops. No warning, no workaround. That's not a preference thing. That's a structural block that can kill a workflow entirely depending on what you're working on. Academic research confirms Doubao restricts Tiananmen Square, Xi Jinping, Taiwan-China relations, the 2019 Hong Kong protests, Uyghur topics and surveillance discussions, And these aren't edge cases, they're documented mandatory blocks. Claude Opus 5 cut cybersecurity refusals by 85% compared to the prior model. And Anthropic published a full public system card while no equivalent Doubao alignment documentation exists. To be fair, if none of those restricted topics are anywhere near your work, Doubao's content policy is basically invisible to you. The 85% cybersecurity refusal reduction for Opus 5 is also a vendor claim with no published refusal rate data for Doubao to compare against. So this one really depends on your specific use case more than any other test. Claude Opus 5 wins test 4. Honestly, I was expecting Doubao's restrictions to be softer than the research showed, but these are structural regulatory blocks, not tunable settings. So Opus 5 wins on both openness and transparency, and that ties the score up. Doubao 2, Claude Opus 5 2. So where does Doubao actually win? Chinese language work full stop. 20 plus regional dialects, native Mandarin optimization, number 1 by monthly active users in China. API cost at 11 cents per million tokens input versus $5 for Opus 5, a free tier that Opus 5 doesn't have, and a dedicated translation model covering 28 plus languages. And where does Claude Opus 5 win? Context window at 1 million tokens, which is 4 times Doubao's best published, 256,000. Top published scores on Frontier Bench, Arc AGI 3, and Cursor Bench, where Doubao has nothing to compare. No mandatory political content blocks, 85% fewer cybersecurity refusals than the prior model, and a public system card documenting alignment properties. Going. And I thought one of these would pull ahead clearly, but they split 2 tests each for totally different reasons. So here's the rule. If you're working primarily in Chinese, running high volume API calls, or need a free tier, Doubao is the pick. If you need a million token context window, frontier reasoning benchmarks, or a model without mandatory political content blocks, Claude Opus 5 is what you reach for.